UNICEF All-Staff Disabilities Training. Module 1. Understanding Disability. A few words from Anthony Lake, Executive Director, UNICEF.
I'm glad for this opportunity to speak with you about an issue that all of us do or should care about greatly: children with disabilities. Just imagine a world where all children are included, involved, where their talents are celebrated, where their contributions are recognized. That is the world towards which UNICEF is working. Is it an ambitious goal? Yes, of course it is. All the more ambitious because the World Bank and WHO estimate that globally there are around 93 million children. 93 million children with disabilities under the age of 15. It is our responsibility at UNICEF to work towards achieving that goal of inclusion and participation for all children through our advocacy and through our action. I know, and I've seen, how many of our country offices are making good progress on including children with disabilities. But we must all do better, every one of us, and we can all do more. As we do so, let's take our strength and inspiration from the millions of children with disabilities who every day fight to overcome barriers most of us have never known. And let's look forward to the day when communities everywhere are enriched by the talents and contributions and inspiring spirit of all children.
And Rosangela Berman-Bieler, Senior Advisor on Children with Disabilities, UNICEF.
Hello, I'm Rosangela Berman-Bieler, the Senior Advisor on Children with Disabilities for UNICEF. According to the World Report on Disability, 1 billion people have a disability. At least 1 in every 10 children in the world has a disability, and 80% live in developing countries. This training video has been developed to give you a better understanding of disability issues and how you can apply that understanding into your work.
Lesson 1. What is disability?
The issue of disability is not new to UNICEF.
Child in wheelchair and child with UNICEF bag.
However, we have moved from only focusing on the protection of children with disabilities to also promoting their rights, the same as we would any other child's. Our understanding of disability and who we are talking about when we refer to people with disabilities has evolved over time. According to the WHO, disability is neither purely biological nor social, but instead the interaction between health conditions and environmental and personal factors. Disability occurs at 3 different stages. First, a person experiences an impairment in body function or structure, such as blindness. That impairment causes a limitation in activity, such as the inability to read print materials or move around without orientation. That limitation, in turn, leads to a restriction in participation, such as exclusion from school.
Animation of child who is blind and cannot see the blackboard at school. Convention on the Rights of the Child and Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women.
Besides the CRC and CEDAW, UNICEF is guided by the CRPD, a convention that redefines the rights of persons with disabilities. According to the CRPD, a person with a disability is someone who is prevented from participating fully in society by a combination of their impairment and other barriers associated with it. Some children are born with a disabling health condition or impairment, while others may experience disability as a result of illness, injury, or poor nutrition, among other causes.
Photo of infant with mother. Photo of woman amputee with daughter.
Children and adults with disabilities include those with hearing,
Child who is deaf in school.
visual,
Child who is blind and teacher.
physical,
Young person using crutches.
communication,
Child with learning disability in classroom.
learning, intellectual, and psychosocial impairments. As external factors impact their daily lives, each child may experience disability in a different way.
A perspective from Uruguay, Maria Emilia Retorto, 18, Montevideo. Maria speaks in sign language. All of us are equal. All people have rights. Each one of us has rights.
Setting aside people with disabilities for the moment, other people also face disabling conditions in a society that is unprepared for diversity. The environment in which we live can allow us to participate in society or exclude us. Here are some examples of how each of us may face disabling conditions during our lives. A baby who needs to be carried or pushed in a pram to be able to move around.
A series of cartoons, pushing pram down slope.
A woman in late pregnancy trying to catch a bus.
Pregnant woman trying to catch bus.
A foreigner who doesn't speak the local language trying to ask for directions.
People speaking different languages trying to communicate.
Someone with a broken leg who is trying to climb stairs.
Woman with crutches finding the elevator out of order.
A senior who can't read the small print instructions on his medication.
Elderly person unable to read small print on a medicine bottle.
I'm sure you found yourself in a disabling position at some point in your life. We have to find effective ways to create enabling environments, and the best strategy to adopt is inclusive or universal design. We'll get to that a little later.
Lesson 2. Disability Models and Approaches.
There are 3 different approaches or models to understanding disability: the charity model, the medical model, and the social and the human rights models. Each model changes the power dynamics between the person and their social and physical environment. Under the charity model, people with disabilities are seen as inferior, useless, dependent, a result of divine punishment, a burden to society, and are not expected to contribute to society in any way. This is still too often the approach of prevention campaigns or funding appeals that elicit feelings of dependency and pity. Under the medical model, disability is seen as a purely medical condition of an individual that should be fixed. The focus is on correcting the person so they can be accepted and integrated into society. This approach sets low expectations for children with disabilities. It labels a child as abnormal.
Animation of doctors greeting patient with a wheelchair.
The social and the human rights models see disability as part of human diversity. These models shift the focus from an individual's impairment to the relationship between the individual and society. It promotes equal rights and opportunities and social inclusion. According to this model, if a person in a wheelchair is unable to reach a ballot box and exercise the right to vote, it is because environmental barriers prevent them from reaching the ballot box, not because they are disabled.
Animation of man walking towards ballot box. Stairs prevent wheelchair user from reaching ballot box.
The social and the human rights models of disability combined with an inclusive approach to development are fundamental principles of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. They are changing the way societies address disability issues and placing people with disabilities at the center of the action that involves them.
A perspective from Tanzania. Alejandro Grinspan, Chief Policy Advocacy and Analysis Program.
It is no longer understood as it was a few years ago as a characteristic or a handicap which is intrinsic to the person, but as something that results from the interaction between a person and his or her environment.
Lesson 3. Words and Images Matter. Disability Vocabulary. Statements of youth with different disabilities from around the world on a monitor.
I am not useless, helpless, or weak.
I am healthy, strong,
capable, and proud.
I just need the opportunity to be myself.
And to participate with my peers.
A boy from Tanzania. Parents shouldn't hide their children with disabilities at home. They should take them to school. A girl from Armenia. I have the right to go to school, to be treated well, to study music, to go out with friends, to do physical exercise.
Treat us equally. Value us for who we are and what we can do.
Not by how we look and what we can't do.
The words we use to describe people and the images we use to portray them matter. When we interact with people with disabilities, common sense, sensitivity, and basic interpersonal skills are often all we need to establish good and mutually satisfactory communication. UNICEF follows the international standard in using person-first terminology. This allows the individual to be the primary focus and the disability is understood as a secondary characteristic. It is better to say a child with a disability rather than a disabled child. It's also preferred to say a child with polio than polio affected, for example. But sometimes people may have their own individual preferences when it comes to terminology. Each culture and country has its own preferred language. Being respectful is the first step for good communication. If necessary, ask a local disabled persons organization in your area.
I use a wheelchair. I'm not confined to a wheelchair.
My wheelchair allows me to go places, to feel free, to do things.
It's an extension of my body, and I love it.
I'm not a victim.
I'm not a victim.
I'm not a victim.
I don't suffer.
I don't suffer. I don't suffer.
I've got a very loving and supporting family. I consider myself one of the most, lucky is an understatement. I would say I'm one of the most blessed.
A child from Serbia. To all those who have helped me, I want to say thank you. A child from Turkey. Children with disabilities deserve and are entitled to everything. Boom.
And when differentiating between children with and without disabilities, don't use the word normal.
Lesson 4, Global Disability Etiquette. This sequence features cartoons illustrating each point.
It is normal for children to ask questions of a person with a disability, and we shouldn't tell them not to.
Child who is blind and her friend.
It's an important point for child development and attitude formation. It is also an opportunity for interaction and for relationships to be built.
A perspective from Uruguay. Students from Centro Educativo y Liceo Seni, Montevideo. They're teaching me values, to show solidarity.
Here are a few guidelines for global disability etiquette. Speak directly to the person, not to a third party. When you are speaking with someone with a disability, if the person is accompanied by a relative or personal assistant, be sure to speak to them directly, not over their head to the other person in the room. It can be extremely frustrating to be left out of a conversation that involves them. Refer to people by their names. Do not use phrases like the little blind girl or the deaf boy. Also, do not talk to adults with disabilities as if they are children who cannot fully understand things or act on their own. It sounds patronizing and disrespectful. Speak from a position that is comfortable for everyone. For instance, if you are speaking with a person who uses a wheelchair, find a place to sit down or squat down to the wheelchair user's eye level. Everyone has the right to make their own decisions. When people have limited mobility, it might seem easier or faster for you to decide on their behalf and do things for them. But, as for any person, autonomy for making decisions and choices is a right. Just give them the opportunity to decide and the extra time they may need. And don't get hung up on stereotypes assuming that people with disabilities are depressed or frustrated, aggressive or bitter, sick or vulnerable. People with disabilities are just people with their own individualities. Do not attribute all their behavior to their disabilities. As in any interpersonal relationship, treat the other person the way you would want to be treated, respectfully and attentively, not with pity or paternalism. The most important thing to remember is to ask before you act.
A perspective from Russia. Evgeny Lyapin, 16, Moscow. I would like to say that there's no point in being fixated or withdrawing into oneself. It is necessary to live a productive life. It is necessary to go outside to let other people see that you are existing. It is necessary just to enjoy life without feeling constricted, worrying about what someone might think of you, or how someone might look at you, or what someone might tell you. End of Module 1. Module 2. Action to remove barriers. Lesson 1. Guiding frameworks.
Welcome to the second module of the disability orientation. Now that we understand the dynamics around disability, we will focus on what this means for UNICEF and how we should include children with disabilities in everything we do. We know that the Convention on the Rights of the Child applies to all children, including children with disabilities. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, also called the CRPD, expands the understanding and strengthens the rights of children with disabilities. It does not introduce additional rights, but it does impose additional obligations on governments to take action to remove the barriers keeping children with disabilities from realizing their rights.
A perspective from Azerbaijan. Mark Herrawood, UNICEF Azerbaijan.
We in UNICEF understood that the first thing that we could do would be to support the government in signing and ratifying the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability. This creates a whole new atmosphere, an atmosphere where children with disability have rights which should be fulfilled rather than being objects of charity and of pity.
The CRPD follows the social and the human rights models of disability, as already explained in Module 1. Article 7 outlines that governments must ensure the realization of all rights for children with disabilities on an equal basis with other children, promote their best interests, and ensure their right to be heard and taken seriously.
A perspective from Fiji. Nasoni Nawailagi, 13 Tailevu. Nasoni speaks in sign language.
My name is Nasoni. It's N-A-S-O-N-I. And this is my name in sign language. I'm from Tailevu in the Fiji Islands. And I am 13 years old. For me, children's rights mean deaf and hearing people can both have the same opportunity to go to school.
Article 24 makes explicit the obligation of governments to ensure access for children with disabilities to inclusive education.
A perspective from Armenia. Christina Rachela, Deputy Representative, UNICEF Armenia.
UNICEF started promoting the principles of inclusive education in 1998. And from 2001 till 2008, with UNICEF support, 12 model inclusive schools have been created through a program of training of teachers and provision of resources to create the conditions for children with disabilities to be included in these schools.
Most of the CRPD articles apply to children, and the convention itself serves as a roadmap for implementation of these rights. Besides the UN conventions, our work on disability is also guided by many regional and national policies that you should be familiar with depending on where you are working.
For information on the CRPD, www.un.org/disabilities.
Our work on disability should follow a human rights-based approach, have a focus on equity and reaching the most marginalized, and follow an inclusive development framework. To achieve equity and inclusion for children with disabilities, we have to ensure equal opportunities are offered to them from a young age throughout their life cycle.
Children of different ages with visual, hearing, and learning disabilities.
To ensure equal opportunities for children with disabilities, their specific needs have to be accommodated so they can in fact compete or have access to society as their peers.
A perspective from Zimbabwe. Zimbabwean child who is blind using a Braille typewriter.
Kumbulani Mbusa is a learner at St. Giles School for Children with Special Needs. For years, the only textbook in his classroom was the one the teacher had. But soon he'll be able to follow his lessons in his own textbook and work at the same pace as his sighted peers. That's because the Ministry of Education, Sports, Arts and Culture, together with UNICEF and donor partners, through an Education Transition Fund, is working to make sure that children in Zimbabwe, especially the most marginalized and vulnerable, have the resources they need at school.
Photo of boy who is deaf learning the alphabet. Photo of boy with learning disability enjoying himself with peers.
Without sign language, a deaf student can be attending a mainstream school but will not have access to learning or socialization. Without a facilitator, an adolescent with Down syndrome can be part of a children's parliament activity but may not be able to engage and participate on an equal basis as their peers. With the adoption of the CRPD and in line with our commitment to equity, UNICEF has developed 3 overarching goals for our work specifically on disability.
3 goals for UNICEF. 1. Mainstream Disability, read by Rosangela Berman-Bieler, Senior Advisor on Children with Disabilities, UNICEF.
The first goal is for UNICEF to mainstream disabilities across all of our policies and programs, both in development and humanitarian situations. But note, mainstreaming does not replace the need for targeted, disability-specific policies and programs and disability-centered legislation. Nor does it mean we do not need disability expertise and focal points. Both in our ongoing programs and in emergencies, accessibility to the physical environment, to information, and to communication is critical. We cannot continue to build barriers to inclusion. Finally, clear political will and allocation of adequate resources for mainstreaming is necessary. We need to budget for disability inclusion at all levels of our program cycle. Disability is very much a part of our diversity. It is a part of our organization and every community we work with. Just like our family name, our ethnicity, our nationality, and our gender, disability is also part of who we are.
2. Champion the Rights of Children with Disabilities, read by Nicholas Alipui, Director of Programs, UNICEF.
Our second goal is for us in UNICEF to really champion and lead on the rights of children with disabilities in everything that we do, and to engage in strategic partnerships with all those who are working to promote the rights of children with disabilities.
Photos of participants with and without disabilities at the 2012 Global Partnership on Children with Disabilities.
It is important that we are knowledgeable enough to engage our partners in the UN system, in civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, but particularly to engage government in terms of legislation, enforcement of laws, and making sure that abuses and any rights violations are dealt with promptly to the benefit of children. It is important especially to realize the specific needs of children in situations of emergency and humanitarian action, when most of the time the rights of these children tend to be overlooked. It is up to us in UNICEF, because of our convening role, our technical advocacy and programmatic role, to take on this responsibility and work to advance the rights of children with disabilities everywhere in everything that we do all the time.
To illustrate some of these goals, here's an example from our work in Sri Lanka.
Scaled-up demining efforts by the government and other agencies are making sure that the environment is safe for people to return to their villages. But there is always the possibility that the surrounding land and jungles are still contaminated, as 10-year-old Vijay found out when he stepped on a landmine in January 2010. He was gathering firewood with others from the community. Less than a year later, and fitted with an artificial limb, he has been able to return to school and bravely face the future among his peers. But this is just the first step in a long and difficult process of recovery for mine victims. UNICEF has played a pivotal role in Sri Lanka's mine action program since its inception, working in the areas of mine risk education, victim assistance and advocacy. The objectives of the program are to provide affected communities with appropriate knowledge to protect themselves from the dangers of landmines and explosive remnants of war, and to support rehabilitative services to survivors and other persons with disabilities. The project also aims at advocating the government of Sri Lanka to accede to the Anti-Personnel Landmine Convention and related legal instruments.
3. Promote Inclusion, read by Richard Bridle, Director of Human Resources, UNICEF.
The third goal is for UNICEF to be an inclusive organisation for all. We are gradually but systematically developing policies that promote inclusive employment, accessibility to premises, communication and information, and an enabling environment for staff and visitors.
Cuttings from UNICEF staff newsletter. Inclusion and Disability special issue. Living with Disability, article from Bhutan. Profiles of some staff members with disabilities.
Now that we know what we want to accomplish, let's talk about where we can start taking immediate action. We can advocate and promote inclusion in everything we do. Address social and cultural norms and practices and systematically combat stigma and discrimination. Increase the participation of children with disabilities, their families, and organizations in policy dialogue and governance activities.
Lesson 2. Promoting Inclusion.
To promote inclusion in everything we do, we should adopt an inclusive development approach and follow universal design principles.
A perspective from the Pacific Islands. Dr. Isiya Ndombi, representative UNICEF Pacific Islands.
Disability inclusive development means that all development planning has to have a perspective for people with disabilities. It means that we have to consider children with disabilities and people with disabilities in the design of all our services and in all the strategies that we develop. On the other hand, it also means that communities have to be made aware through effective communication of the rights of persons with disabilities so that they can care for them better, but that also so that the people with disabilities can be able to demand their own rights.
Persons with and without disabilities enjoying a walk together.
Inclusive development recognizes diversity as a fundamental aspect of social, economic, and human development. Instead of creating isolated policies and actions to serve different social groups, it promotes an integrated approach that can benefit everyone. For example, instead of building new institutions for children with disabilities and taking them away from society, we should build inclusive services for all in the community. We should rely on the existing knowledge and expertise of special services to build capacity in the system as a whole so it can absorb this population.
A perspective from Serbia, Jelena Maric, 15, Secondary School of Economics student, Uzice. Jelena has cerebral palsy. I have been fortunate to grow up in a family. Whatever the conditions and services are like in those care homes, nothing can replace a family. The family atmosphere, the support and kind words of parents, a mother's hug and kiss, and a perspective from Turkey. Ayman Abulaban, representative UNICEF Turkey.
The establishment of pediatric developmental units now being established in so many different hospitals around the country. This is a result of a long-term partnership between UNICEF and Ankara University. And these developmental units now are bringing to the routine work that they used to do usually in the hospitals, in the pediatric units. They are bringing the developmental aspect where children are being, early disabilities are being detected and dealt with, and involving, of course, the family and the community around us. This is also very important because it represents a shift in the whole pediatric thing, and it also can be an excellent model for other countries similar to Turkey to benefit from.
A key strategy for inclusive development is universal or inclusive design. It is a concept through which everything we design, whether it is a policy or a product, is usable by the greatest number of people, regardless of their age, ability, or social status. In some cases, children with disabilities still may need specific accommodations or specific attention. Here are some examples of universal design. Large numbers on a phone are easier to read.
A series of cartoons, someone squinting at small numbers on phone but happy with larger ones.
Wider latrines and door width stalls increase access for all people.
Person with disability using an accessible toilet.
Closed captioning on TV helps persons with hearing limitations and those who cannot understand the language.
Child enjoying a TV show with closed captions.
Did you know that, according to the World Bank, to build accessible and inclusive infrastructure would only cost about 1% more if it were included in the design phase? However, if we don't plan ahead, the cost will be much higher later on. Accessibility and universal design do not necessarily mean high cost or high technology. Low-cost wooden ramps allow everyone easier access in and out of a health facility or a school.
Blueprints for accessible features on a structure.
There are unlimited examples of local, low-cost solutions. Universal Design for Learning has developed a curriculum that gives everyone equal opportunities to learn. It offers a blueprint for curriculum and resource adaptations, not a single one-size-fits-all solution, but rather flexible approaches that can be customized and adjusted for individual needs.
A perspective from Mozambique, Nehemias Gilberto Raul Zandamela, Teacher, Resource Center for Inclusive Education, Macia. My name is Nehemias Gilberto Raul Zandamela. I am 34 and I am a teacher at the Resource Center for Inclusive Education in Macia. My classroom is like any regular classroom, but the difference is that I use some visual resources to better capture the attention of my deaf students. I use a computer and a slideshow, and I reproduce the content of each class in film, and then I add the explanation in sign language. In sign language, he says, "For the whole world, I send you all my love and a hug, to all deaf children." Lesson 3. Combating Stigma and Discrimination.
Children with disabilities and their families are often left out and face stigma and discrimination due to harmful social norms and cultural beliefs, attitudes, and practices. This may limit their development and put them at risk of neglect, abuse, exploitation, and exclusion. A social norm is a rule or behavior that members of a community follow because they think it is expected of them. They may also think that following a social norm will get them some sort of rewards such as social status or admiration, and that ignoring the norm could cause them shame or harassment. When these norms exist, UNICEF uses communication for development to address social and cultural barriers. We know that changing deep-rooted beliefs may be difficult and take a long time, but advocacy and public education initiatives can promote marginalized groups in social policies and practices. As an important strategy for supporting our work, we should adhere to principles and guidelines for holistic and inclusive communicating with children. UNICEF's resource pack, Communicating with Children, provides 4 proven and easy-to-apply principles on developing materials for, with, and about children.
www.unicef.org/CWC.
Awareness-raising campaigns stress that we are all different and it is normal to be different. Check out this example from Brazil. It's called Girl with Drums.
I love music, like any girl my age. I love the internet. I love parties. But I'm not the same as other girls my age at everything. In one way, I'm very different. I play the drums. Girl with Down syndrome playing the drums.
This one comes from Montenegro.
Since the beginning of the campaign in September 2010, many children who had previously been invisible have become active members of society as youth advocates for inclusion, athletes, musicians, dancers, friends, students, daughters, sons, brothers, and sisters.
Children and adults with disabilities should be included as part of any and all communication we make. Disability should be portrayed as a normal part of life. As in the case of this public safety video from Laos.
Children with and without disabilities are part of communication material.
Messages, words, sounds, and images can be empowering and uplifting, or disempowering and stigmatizing. We need to be proactive about challenging social norms. Portraying children with disabilities as being weak and helpless hurts them by reinforcing feelings of pity and fear about them. Children with disabilities should be seen as contributing, as creative problem solvers. They should represent the same range of interests and abilities as children without disabilities. Check out this example from China.
I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a dancer. Children in classroom expressing their dreams using sign language. Deaf people can do anything except hear.
It is important to work in partnership with children with disabilities and disabled people's organizations. Reach out to local organizations representing people with disabilities and consult with them on the most appropriate approaches, like what kind of language to use and how to adapt an environment. They will know best what is needed.
A perspective from Montenegro. Nikola Zekic, student Vasapavic High School. Nikola has a visual disability. I was there and participated in the writing of the song verses and in the recording of the backup vocals, as well as in the filming of the TV spot for the song. It was a wonderful, unique experience for me. Lesson 4. Increasing Participation. A perspective from Azerbaijan. Sima Alisgarova, 13, Azerbaijan. I liked going to school because you get to talk to the other children, joke around with them, have fun together. It's boring at home. Not much to do except watch TV and play on the computer, so it's not that interesting at home. I prefer to study.
Participation is a basic right for every child. However, children with disabilities are too often left out, excluded from the most basic activities like playing with their peers, attending school with their siblings, going to church, and participating in their community. Participation allows children to form new friendships and develop their skills, express their creativity, sharpen their mental and physical health, and determine meaning and purpose in life. Genuine participation strengthens a child's self-confidence and self-esteem. It is important to ensure that children with disabilities can fulfill those roles. This can involve providing sign language interpreters, engaging with parents and assistants, and ensuring physical accessibility of venues. Sometimes children can be included, but don't have the proper support. A child who is blind may be allowed to attend school, but can't fully participate without the proper support, including access to Braille and to assistive technology.
Photograph of pair of hands reading Braille. A perspective from Tanzania. Shuda Bahati, middle school student, Tanzania. Shuda is albino. A problem we face is that we cannot see what is written on the blackboard, and we find it difficult to read small letters in books.
We will now share some examples from the field on engaging children with disabilities. Together with our partners, UNICEF helped ensure participation in Rwanda's Children's Parliament.
Mukanda Yisenga Alodi, 17.
We are very happy as children with disabilities to attend this meeting because during the last meetings we were not invited, so we were excluded. So being here is also very important to us, and it makes us very happy because we are included in the Rwandan society.
From these meetings, children put forward recommendations to ministers, governors and mayors at the summit. Top of the list was the need to include children living with disabilities in all forums and improve services for them.
A perspective from Jordan. In 2011, UNICEF and partners helped increase the participation of children with disabilities through sport. Jordanian children with and without disabilities enjoying themselves playing sports such as basketball and fencing.
Achieving participation is the goal of these programs, but the journey is just as important. UNICEF's programs will only be truly inclusive if they had meaningful participation of children with a variety of backgrounds and conditions, including disabilities. The examples we've seen show that we are making a difference, but more work remains to be done.
A perspective from Zimbabwe. Lauren Rumble, Head of Child Protection, UNICEF Zimbabwe.
UNICEF is working with government to revitalize the health, education, social protection and child protection systems in the country, together with donors, communities, the government and children themselves. The new constitution is a chance for children with disabilities to really see their vision become a reality.
Lesson 5. Creating a strong evidence base.
Acquiring data on children with disabilities continues to be a major challenge. This limits government's understanding and ability to address their issues. We must work with national statistical offices and other UNICEF counterparts to ensure disability is included in census and household surveys. We should take this population into account from the elaboration of situation analysis through monitoring results for equity at the community and all levels of research and evaluation of our programs and practices. It is important for us to have reliable data on the current situation to inform our priorities and country programs.
Mix logo.
For this, we need to be aware of the various methods of data collection associated with measuring disability. Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, MIX, has tools to measure disability, and we are ready to support countries to implement them.
Summary.
Many resources on disability are available and can be found in the resource section of this module or on our website.
www.unicef.org/disabilities. Closing messages from Victor Santiago Pineda, PhD, MCP, Executive Director, Pineda Foundation and scriptwriter, and Rosangela Berman-Bieler, Senior Advisor on Children with Disabilities, UNICEF.
I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed writing it. I think that together we can make inclusion happen for the millions of children we serve each day. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone for your support and guidance on how to mainstream disabilities across our work. A special thank you to those who submitted materials for this orientation. Together, we can build a more inclusive UNICEF and a more inclusive society.
Credits: Tim Gregory, Director; Victor Pineda, Writer and Production Associate; Chantal Aites, Narrator; Oliver Edsforth, Music; Aaron Mustamar, Animation; Dean Tester, Sign Language Interpreter; Barbara Kaluki, Key Contributor; Sergio Maresman, Key Contributor; Denise Terena, Key Contributor, with the support of the Disability Team, UNICEF. Anna Bolyaeva, Amy Farkas, Christopher Borge, Gopal Mitra, Liv Saber, Rosangela Berman-Bieler. Special thanks to UNICEF Azerbaijan, UNICEF Armenia, UNICEF Eritrea, UNICEF Fiji, UNICEF Ghana, UNICEF Moldova, UNICEF Montenegro, UNICEF Mozambique, UNICEF Namibia, UNICEF Rwanda, UNICEF Serbia, UNICEF Sri Lanka, UNICEF Tanzania, UNICEF Turkey, UNICEF Zimbabwe. UK Sport, British Council, the London Organising Committee of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, Division of Communication, UNICEF NYHQ, students of University of California, Berkeley, USA, the Inter-American Institute on Disability and Inclusive Development, Uruguay, Colegio y Liceo Seni, Uruguay, Instituto Alfredo Vázquez Acevedo, IAVA, Uruguay. Number 333 Primary School, Montevideo, Uruguay. Instituto Meta Social, Brazil. Thank you to the governments of Australia and Denmark for their support to UNICEF's disability mainstreaming.